What's wrong with your camera?
My laptop is a Lenovo ThinkPad, and it's got one of those infrared cameras. So if you had Windows, it allows you to unlock your screen by simply staring at it. It uses that camera
Wow.
instead.
I thought you were at some sort of techno party.
It's yeah. Jarj, shall we get started by going through our blockers?
Yeah, let's get started. I will share my screen. Going through the highlights. First issue, we already have it on the agenda, so I'm going to skip that one. Unified structure logging. This is, oh, okay.
Sorry, that's me. I'm also cleaning up as we talk.
No problem. I think we decided, Skarbek, that the unified logging is not a blocker anymore for Git SSH. Do you agree with that?
That's correct.
And possibly not a blocker for the front end either. I think the main thing we would like to do here is to split out some of the different log files into different indexes. For example, right now for virtual machines, we have Puma split out from Rails logs. Right now, they're all mixed together. But I'm not sure if this is really a blocker. I think I'm gonna take it, or Maren, if you want to, since you're already doing it, I think we can take it off the highlights.
Yeah, we can take it off the highlights, but it might be actually good to just leave it be, because I see Jason actually answering that things are scheduled for 13/7.
Okay,
so
great.
If it's already scheduled, let's leave it so we can keep an eye on it.
That sounds good. Next is deciding on environment tier, type, stage, shard, service, etc. Deployment, all these labels for our Kubernetes infrastructure. Andrew's been working on this actively, and let me just make sure that this issue is the best one to track. I think this is the best issue to track for now. We do have some other issues that are blocked by this. I think Andrew said that he might demo something a bit later, so we can talk about it later in the meeting. And then new performance differentiation between k8s and virtual machines. This one that Skarbek and I were looking at yesterday, no, day before yesterday. Skarbek, did we end up reducing the percentage of traffic to the cluster?
I did not reduce it. The only thing I did was block it from proceeding with the change request any further. So we're still at taking 33% of the traffic at this moment.
Yeah, I think we should reduce it to like 5.
Okay.
So we
So
settle this.
what we said on the call yesterday was that on pushes, which are already quite slow on GitLab.com, we're talking about 200 milliseconds here. And is that worth us losing the data that we get from this?
Well, I don't think,
this is an HTTP request.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like, for example, I assume we're seeing the same issue with Git HTTPS that we're seeing here with Git SSH.
Yeah, yeah, quite possibly. But sort of my point is that it's like Git operations. People have more tolerance for them if you want.
Yeah.
We talked about maybe lowering it to a value that is a percentage of traffic that is not going to make a huge impact on everyone else, but will still provide us enough data. If that is 33% that we have right now, we can leave it. Yeah. If that is 10%, we can go 10, but it's up to you.
My ask is that we have more than like 10 requests per second, like whatever that is, like in percentage.
Sure. I think, yeah, that sounds. I was thinking it would be more on the order of 100 requests per second if we lower it,
that's
but I'm not
better.
sure. but I'm not sure what. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter. I guess you're right. In the grand scheme of things, it's not a big impact to people. It's just really bothers me that we don't understand why.
Well, I noticed, I think there was an assumption that everyone else is going to write in the point that we made yesterday, and then no one did.
I did write something, but I wrote it like while I was in another meeting, so I don't know whether that was the point we were making.
No, well, yeah, I guess so. I actually just took your point as mostly being about not rolling out more, but and actually when I read the rest of it, it is true. But Skarbek, it looked like maybe the problem is because we are not routing to the internal API and we're getting queuing on because we're routing to the Git service, and there's, Stan pointed out above, the problem is queuing on the requests, right? So that's where we're spending all that time. It's not like the execution of the request is taking less time. It's the queuing before it executes. And so that means that we've got too few Sidekick workers, or not Sidekick, sorry, Puma workers, wherever those requests are getting routed to. And we spoke about two things. And the first one was that the Puma workers, we obviously, whatever pool that is, needs to be bigger. But the other thing is that it might just be better to route that to the internal API rather. I don't know where it's going at the moment, but internal API might be better than whatever it's going to.
Okay, so I wrote it wrongly then, Andrew. So might worth correcting it in the issue, because I said it's going to the internal API and maybe go outside to see whether there is a misconfiguration on the Kubernetes side or not.
Yeah,
that's how I understood it yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what I was imagining yesterday was that we should just try and route it to the internal API. And if that fixes the problem, then, that kind of ties in with this. Is there any reason why you wouldn't send that to the internal API, Skarbek?
I don't know.
And the one potential thing is that it's different. It's more difficult to kind of make sure the request is going to the same version of the application, right? But sorry, I just got a spam caller. But like, I don't think that that's a major risk right now.
Yeah.
Can I?
It's something we could certainly try out.
About shell or get HTTPS?
It's the backend call from there, Jason. So it's from GitLab shell to authorize, the internal, yeah.
Yeah. So this is going to the GitLab web service.
That's why I wanted to ask.
Yeah. So by default, this is going to GitLab web service, which is the same pods that are servicing Git HTTPS traffic. I think when we're able to split things out better, we'll probably go to the API fleet instead of the pods that we're using now. But maybe we should just switch this to the internal API and see what happens.
Which is customizable. So maybe since we're on pause with the migration, Jarb, you and I had discussed spinning up the canary variety of this because I failed to do that. So what we could do is configure the canary endpoint as necessary with the customization to the internal API endpoint and see if we see a performance differentiation between those.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
That'd be a safe way to experiment with it.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about it. I think that's be a good thing to do.
Another thing to note is that if that queuing is happening for the internal authorized requests, then it's probably also happening for the other ones, and it just sounds like the pool of Puma workers isn't big enough.
Yeah, it's happening
the same
for both.
size?
Authorized keys and the internal, like both. Yeah. Every API request is a little bit slower. So yeah, I think I think switching this to the internal API makes a lot of sense. That isolates the changes, and we can see how it's performing.
And are you going to do that for Workhorse and HTTP as well as?
I would say no. Like I prefer not to yet. I mean, maybe we can consider that, but
Because then
for
effectively
GitHub,
what you're running is just workhorse, and you're no longer actually running Puma for the Git HTTP authentications, right? You're just running workhorse, so you almost don't need to deploy Puma in that case.
Right. There are some hiccups to that we'll get into at another point, but separating those two containers is not quite doable yet.
Yeah,
'Cause the
maybe it's
shared,
doable for Git. I don't know. Is it not doable for Git HTTPS? Is like maybe LFS is an issue there?
No, I mean, the pod is
Or no?
currently not designed in such a way to be able to shut off web service.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, it was more like it's just that it wouldn't be getting used if both of them were using internal API. You could just leave it running.
Yeah. Okay. Hot off the press, I just submitted this issue now. This is something I noticed, I think yesterday, no, the day before yesterday, which is that we don't currently support zero downtime deployments for the Nginx ingress controller. What this means is that if there's any reason why we have to cycle those pods, it's quite disruptive. The connections are terminated immediately. And interestingly, I just did a quick check with strace. When you delete an Nginx controller pod, it gets a sig kill, which is a bit surprising because I thought the default was sig term, not sig kill. But in any case, there are a bunch of blog posts about this behavior, and basically you need to add a pre-stop script to the Nginx controller to let it do a graceful shutdown, and we'll have to also add the the termination window, the termination window for Kubernetes, kind of say like wait longer for the connections, or wait longer before killing the pod, wait longer for the process to quit. So this is pretty high priority, I think, for us. I'm going to say it's a blocker for now because we definitely don't want to move the front end before doing this. It's not so great for Git HTTPS, though. It's pretty rare that we're cycling Nginx controller pods. It does happen occasionally. Like we did an Nginx controller. We took a chart upgrade today, and that cycled the controller pods, which caused a little bit of errors for Git HTTPS.
All right, we'll put severity 1 then.
Yeah, Jason, do you remember? Do you recall if we looked into this at all, or is this brand new?
I don't specifically remember it.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a new version of the Nginx controller. I know there's a backlog item to upgrade it. I wonder if that might resolve this potentially.
From everything I've read so far, that without doing the pre-stop script, that there's really no way, like you have to do this yourself. But it sounds like it's doable. We just need to update the config.
I'm asking Andrew T to help us prioritize this.
Next is cloud native GitLab. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I'll ask afterwards.
Next is cloud native GitLab pages. This is moving along. We also took the chart upgrade today, which added the pages config. So that was nice. So we have the pages bucket now officially configured, even though we don't have pages turned on. So I think we're going to be ready for this when it lands. Okay, on to the demo. I invited Jason just to answer any questions that we have about the MR to split traffic. Jason, could you just give us kind of a brief kind of introduction and kind of overview of where we went with this?
Sure. So there's two factors that come into play, but the first one is having a method to actually split traffic at the ingress. To do that, we have to be able to deploy effectively multiple deployments that provide us with named fleets. And the way that we're doing that is out of the box, you have no declaration of deployments, and it will basically create one default out of the normal chart properties. When you do supply deployments, it will take the defaults from the upper level of the chart values, very similar to how we do it with Sidekick. And then it will create a number of actual deployment objects, ingress objects, PDBs, HPAs, all the individual resources based on the names of the keys for the deployments. and then you can override any of the effectively chart global values with what you provide for the individual deployment. So I have an example here actually running. If I think I have it in the MR. I do not have the example that I have here with internal versus external APIs on the MR. So let me just share. Close that window. Share that screen. And grab you. I have my configuration for Zoom toolbar. Thank you. Share. I have my configuration set up in such a way that I am deploying a default API and an internal API. And then to this aspect, I'm telling the various other services where to send their traffic based on where Workhorse is actually at. So I have GitLab shell specifically sending it to the API fleet, which is what everybody else would actually hit for API. And then Gitly, for example, would actually be sending traffic to the internal fleet directly. If I look at the Kubernetes setup that we have, I've got a small number of pods for API, a small number of pods for internal API, and 2 for default. And when we look at the ingress, I have one ingress for /API and one ingress for /. But I do not have one that directs any traffic to internal API. Is there any particular question?
Looks great. Really excited about this. I have a few questions. Well, actually, I think Skarbek, you had some questions on the agenda. So go ahead first.
Yeah, I did. I was just wondering, is there a nice clean migration from the current state that we utilize today to this new status?
Effectively, if you aren't, the way this is set up, if you do not supply a actual deployments map, it will just deploy what you already had. The only difference is that you'll now have a deployment in pods with name -default. So it's an automatic change for anybody who already has one in play. It's just the full pod names change. And let me show here. If I go into the describe for here, you'll see that we've effectively added just one more label here that just says what is the particular web service that you're sending it to. So that app label hasn't changed, but we've added one more label to delineate which fleet a given pod is from.
Perfect. Okay.
And
my
to
second
the
question
interest-
was,
Okay,
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
Now, my second question was being able to name deployments just to provide some extra customization in case we need some sort of contextual information quickly. But it looks like you're adding the necessary data we need, at least to the pod names. I would imagine the same is going to see. We'll see the same on the deployment names as well, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect.
In their own name, everything that is generated now has this additional label in place.
Yep.
So the one thing I will point out is that when this change happens, it will be a full replace from the old PDB. So there may be a blip as it transfers from one fully named label set to the new fully named label set. Trying to find a way around that, but I'm not sure I'm going to find it.
So this would just have to be a very careful rollout when we get a chance to do this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One thing that I don't have yet implemented, but I'm going to sneak into this MR, is for a long time, we've basically been stuck on specifically target average value for the metrics. While I was doing this setup, what I do actually have in place is beginnings of how to actually fully override the metrics that the HPA consumes. It's there. It's not necessarily going to be part of the feature, but it might just sneak in because it's a 3-line change to the template. So this could allow you future capability to better tweak how the metrics are being handled for the HPA.
And what will go in there, Jason?
In this particular case, you would be able to supply the entirety of a YAML configuration for a metrics. This would actually effectively replace this item here, where we have resource CPU.
Okay.
That entire YAML array section of the metrics definition would be replaceable.
Awesome. But if we, I know like this is like jumping way ahead, so forgive me, but if we wanted to use Prometheus metrics in there, there's still extra steps, right? Where there's other things that you need before you can actually be driving that off like Prometheus metrics, right?
Right. So basing it off of Prometheus metrics such as QDepth, that's something that actually requires further setup within the cluster. It's not something that's specific to this chart. It's just you need to have this additional functionality available to your Kubernetes environment. And that's the use of custom metrics. To use those custom metrics, you got to make sure that you have the necessary controllers, providers, and that your HBA setup within Kubernetes knows how to get the data from it.
Yeah. And it's going to be a long time till we're doing that, but I think it'll be pretty amazing when we can, but it's probably way off.
Yeah, I look forward to the day when we can, to say the least. And it's not as far as other people who may watch this think, because we're talking in GitLab time. So it could be a little ways off, but yeah.
Cool.
Any other wanders in regards to this?
Yeah, I'm adding. Yeah, I have a few. So one is node selector, extra and pod labels, and Nginx annotations. Node selector, was that on the original list or not? I think it might not have been, but I don't remember.
It may not have been. I went ahead and added node selectors, tolerations, additional annotations, additional labels. So you will be able to inherit pretty much every property of the chart that has a real effect.
You're awesome. Thank you. That's great. The next two kind of tie together. You know, right now we have HA proxy, which is doing this routing. We're turning this around a bit, right? Because now we're going to have a single ingress, which is going to route traffic instead of having multiple ingresses. Right now we route by not only path, but by header and by cookie. Is this, now with cookie doesn't really matter. This is for Canary, which we run in a separate namespace anyway. But what about header? And this is important for WebSocket traffic.
That's something I'll actually have to look into when it comes to how the Nginx ingress behaves. And just to throw this out there have been discussions about people wanting to replace Nginx ingress with something else. But we simply haven't had the time to look. But when it comes to routing it by a specific header, if Nginx has the ability, then in theory, there's an ability to do it in a controller. I just have to find out if it's capable right now and how it is exposed.
Okay. I guess the one issue, and Andrew, I guess this is relevant for scalability work. Right now we do rate limiting in HA proxy for only API traffic. If we start routing at the Nginx ingress, we're going to lose that rate limiting capability. That's probably okay, right? Because we're on the cusp of using application rate limiting, right?
The application rate limiting requires, it's still leveraging HA proxy, right? Or so effectively for the allow lists. And
for the header,
yeah. So
we're not going to.
I'm sure we can do that in Nginx though, right?
No, that's not the problem. We're going to have HA proxy. The problem is that this is replacing the API and web split. It's now happening down at Nginx. So what it means is that traffic will first come into HA proxy, and then all traffic will just go, there'll just be one backend, which will be the
Right.
Nginx ingress. And then from there, then it will split between web and API. We can still add the header at HA proxy. It'll just be set for all types of requests, web, API, etc.
That's what we want though.
Yeah, I think that's what we want. So
yeah, so
I think it's okay.
If Craig Miskell's doing the work at the moment on HA proxy as I expect he is, then he's adding those whitelists to the web and to API and to, I mean, I don't know about Git, but certainly web and API. And at the moment we don't have anything on the web, which is pretty weird. So he's adding that ACL stuff on there.
Yeah. I guess,
did
Jason,
just check Nginx. There is a way to do the rate limiting through annotations on the ingresses.
What we don't want rate limiting per se, Jason. We want an ACL. We want like a list of IPs that, you know, basically a bunch of CIDRs that say, you know, this network. When you see one of these networks, add this header. So it's not actually doing rate limiting. It's actually just including a header, which is like a bypass that will get passed on to the application. And it just says to the application, don't do any rate limiting. This is, you know, special customer X, or this is the GitLab runner, and we don't allow, you know, we're allowed to bypass our rate limiting infrastructure. And that header is injected at the moment by HA proxy. I mean, I'm sure Nginx must have similar. I know Nginx got maps, which might kind of relate, but I don't know if you can kind of include them in an external file.
I will have to look into that one.
For now, we're okay, because we're not getting rid of HA proxy, but we're removing the logic, a lot of logic out of HA proxy, which I think is good for us long term, assuming we keep with the Nginx controller, which maybe we will. So I don't think that's a problem, but we will need to make sure that we can route based on header in addition to request paths. And these request paths, I was just taking a look at our HA proxy config. I think what we have, like, there's nothing, I don't see anything complicated that we're doing, but we may want to take another look. Great. Anyone have anything else for this topic? If not, let's move to Andrew on saturation metrics.
Cool. So obviously haven't prepared a thing, but what I was doing last week was, we've got the saturation framework that we use to measure like all different types of utilization and saturation. And we added 2 new things into that. And those are the container memory, which is basically how close a container is to reaching its limit for memory. And then the same thing for CPU. And what's really nice about these metrics is that they have our existing service and shard and stage labels on them. So, you know, if we deploy something into staging and it goes awry, then, you know, we'll be able to see it and isolate it very quickly. Obviously, for the people on this call, I think it'll be more obvious that, you know, a pod, you know, at the moment we're kind of going on pod names as far as I can tell. And I think people in this call might be able to recognize a pod name and know that that's a canary Git pod. But, you know, if you spread that knowledge out across the whole department or even wider, it's going to be really hard for everyone to kind of get to grips with, you know, this is a canary Git shell, GitLab shell container. And so I've been trying to get it so that, you know, we've already got these existing labels, type, shard, and stage, which we use for lots of things. And I've been trying to massage the metrics that we get from Kubelets and from cAdvisor and from KubeState metrics into the taxonomy that we use for our labels, the way we divide things up. So we've got a Git service, we've got a web service, we've got an API service, and we want those metrics to be the same way. So if I go just take a look at this and go to here.
I added a link to the agenda for an example if you want to just click on it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Oh, that's the, yeah, I'm actually trying to find, yeah, well, we can look at it here as well because it's repeated in here.
Sure.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So there you can kind of see it's really, really busy at the moment, probably too busy. One of the things I was thinking of doing is actually not having this level of detail because it's too much. But what we could possibly do is just put like quantiles in here. So we say like, this is the 99th quantile. This is the 50, the median, and we can have like a sort of cloud of where the spread of these values is. I don't know how people feel about that, or if they actually want to see these individual parts. But it is also worth pointing out like that bug in Sidekick in the background migrations, there was something spinning that had been spinning for 3 weeks. And, as soon as we saw this on the Sidekick dashboard, I was drawn to it, and then we discovered the bug and we could dig it up. Where at the moment, no one's really, as far as I know, going into the Kubernetes metrics and looking where this kind of drew that out a little bit, I think. So that's kind of the first thing. And then the second thing that I'm doing is, obviously at the moment, we've got these dashboards that we generate. And we've got lots of useful stuff on here. And for VMs, you can just open this up and you can go to node metrics and you can immediately see like a whole bunch of information about the machines that are running this piece of the fleet, right? And what I really want is I want exactly the same things for Kubernetes without people having to kind of navigate through namespaces and nodes and all the other stuff. And so I just want it to be like the same kind of straightforward sort of thing. So I've been trying to figure out how to do that. And what I've got is we've got the metrics catalog. And I've just got a small amount of configuration in there, which is saying that for the Git service, we're running 2 deployments, one called GitLab, one called Shell, and it's got one container called GitLab Shell. And then we have a second service called Web Service, and it's got these 2 containers that are running inside that. And with that, what you can do is then, I'll just show you. So then effectively all we need to do is we can go to the Git service and say, give me the Kubernetes dashboards for the Git service. And when you run that, I'll just do git slash. It'll generate some dashboards. And these are obviously like very much work in progress. And I have some questions that I'll bounce off you guys. But so this gives you, broken down by our straight, the taxonomy that we use. So you can go here and you can change this to Canary, and it will give you the Canary nodes. And there's no sort of navigating around with namespaces or anything like that. So that's quite different with Canary, isn't it? And this is, you have 1 row per container, and then you have sort of a header per deployment. And if you go, the same thing just works for, say, mailroom. Oops. We just have the same dashboards. And this was kind of interesting. I don't know if mailroom's got like a leak in it or something like that. but it seems to have these big drop-offs every now and again. Sorry, I didn't show. I was showing the container overview, but we also have this deployment overview, which is just a kind of aggregated view of the deployment. So this is kind of a more interesting one for Git. So you can see here it's broken down by the 3 clusters, and I don't know if that's something that we want, or if we want to just aggregate all together, or let me know. Whatever's best for people, but you can kind of see the registry. There was some kind of again, no, not that one. And so we can build these dashboards with a very small amount of configuration, and we kind of get all the stuff. So yeah, registry, during that deploy, there was like a massive drop off. So I'm guessing that the registry also has leaks of some sort that we need to take a look at perhaps. But anyway, obviously this is very basic at the moment. Like I'd really like to have things on here like evictions and a whole bunch of different failures, but all tied into the way that we think of the application, with the stages and the shards and the services that we've got. So I think I've kind of cracked the way to do this, and we've just got the deployments going as well, so that's great. So the first question I have is whether this needs to be its own dashboard. Obviously there'll be more things on here, but we can either have this as its own dashboard, or we can have it built into the main dashboard for a particular service. So in the same way here, you can kind of go down and open up the node metrics and get like how much CPU, how much memory the VMs are using. Do we want it in here as a folded down row, or do we want it as a separate dashboard? The only thing that's sort of pushing me towards a separate dashboard is these dashboards are getting a bit big and a bit slow. So I was thinking we could do some nice linking where, right up at the top, it's like go to the Kubernetes, and have like some good navigation between the different dashboards. But I'm keen to get other people's opinions on that.
Can I ask just one or two questions, Andrew? And
yeah,
you completely ignore if you want. But like I'm looking, like you scroll down to this dashboard. Actually, I don't know about others, but like I spend most of the time looking at that and not go into detail there for every one of these.
Yeah.
I actually go to the drop down and like investigate like through the service, or rather through the component differently. So to me, like this all feels a bit redundant in the overview section. Like if you want details, you go to details.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah, exactly, because the service level stuff is what you get on this page. And that's like, is this affecting users? And yeah, you're quite right. Like that's why we don't have like CPU and memory and stuff on these, because it's about like user experience rather than the machine. So that kind of sounds like you want to go with a separate page as well.
I mean, I'm just saying how it looks to me. I'm not saying.
No, I think that's reasonable. The other thing that I was wondering about was how would people feel about having the deployments have the same name for Canary and main stage, because it would make my life so much easier. Obviously, they're in different namespaces, but obviously, we've got stuff like this over here. Where is it? This over here. This is actually wrong for Canary. So I could figure that out for in Canary. I think it's GitLab-CNY-shell, and obviously the other one is not GitLab-main, so it's not like GitLab-stage something. They're different things, and it makes it kind of difficult. And also, if they have the same name, those two deployments, it's easier to do comparisons between them, with computers. And so you can say, just like, look at all the things between the GitLab CNY namespace and the GitLab namespace, and kind of do like for like comparisons if you want, and use that for some sort of health checks. So I don't know if people feel super strongly about that, but it would make my life a whole lot easier if they had the same name.
I think that's a reasonable ask. The only thing we need to be cautious about is that we need to make sure our metrics are coming through with that namespace label such that we don't break our dashboards and alerting as they currently are.
Okay. So are those, I need to take a look at what those are, but have they got hard coded into them like GitLab, CNY? Like, are we doing alerting at that level?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I'll review that. And if I can nudge it, then would you be okay with us kind of moving over to matching names, matching deployment names?
I think it's reasonable. I'm curious if Jarb has a differing opinion.
I think the tricky thing there is that it's not going to match what the actual deployment names are. Like right now, all our deployments are prefixed with the namespace, the name of the namespace. Yeah. So if you do a kubectl get deployments, you're going to see GitLab CNY, GitLab shell, or GitLab shell, because the name of it is GitLab shell, and then the namespace is GitLab.
Do we have to put that prefix on? Like the whole, would it be something that,
Jason might know the answer to that. Jason, do you know whether the names of the deployments, like right now they're prefixed with the namespace name, is that something we can change?
They're not specifically prefixed with the namespace name, actually.
That's what we call the release. We call the release GitLab CNY.
Oh, I thought it was the namespace. Okay, so it just happens to be the same as the namespace.
Right.
So it's the release
name.
Okay.
What we could do is go through and ensure we have fully functioning name overrides in place so that you could be a little more custom with them. But as of right now, it's basically release name and then chart.
Yeah.
And if we were to change the default, would that be a breaking change?
If you were to change the outright name of all the resources due to the generated behavior, assume that it's going to just kind of go poof on one side and stand up a new one.
Okay, just wondering if that would be a major, would that be a major version or can that be a minor version?
That would be a you thing though. What I'm saying is
I was hoping we could change the chart default to what we want.
That would be a longer discussion, and that would definitely be a breaking change, which would be a major version of the chart.
Yeah.
But we don't need to, like, unless we all want everyone else to suffer with us, right?
Well, I kind of do want people to suffer with us, but
yeah.
I guess
I tend to agree with Jarb. Like, we don't want to. If we can keep it the same as what everyone else is using, that'd be quite nice.
Right, and right now the only thing is that because you have GitLab CNY, that's why it ends up with that in it.
Yeah. Like, what I would like to ultimately, obviously I've got my head in the Prometheus metrics for this. What I'd really ultimately like to end up with is that we're not using like regular expression matches to kind of select metrics anywhere. Like, it's like, and everything, it's like the deployment is this, and we're not doing like question mark CNY and all sorts of hacky things like that, because it just kind of helps build more structure around the metrics.
Forgive my weird faces. Why aren't we using labels and annotations?
We could. I mean, that's a very good. We could label. So I actually brought this up with Jarv. We could totally do that. So I asked for our type label, which is effectively a badly named service label on the deployments, and that would be super helpful already. We could just use our own label and then match on that, but we'd need to add it to the deployment. That might be a much better option.
One of the things that's already there and deployed to all objects created by the charts is the release name. So if you needed to know the difference between Canary and production, it should be as simple as checking labels release name versus doing a full regex on things.
I want a way of being able to tell that, like, this is the GitLab shell, like this component in Canary is the GitLab shell, and it matches the GitLab shell component in the main stage, which is in a different namespace.
Right.
So we could just use our own label for that. Maybe that's a better way to do it. And then we just leave the deployments as they are.
Right. So first would be that there's a label called app equals, and that sets whatever the particular chart
Yeah.
came from.
Yeah.
For get HTTPS, that's actually going to say web service
Yeah.
at the moment. When it
Yeah.
comes to shell, the app is GitLab shell. So you would have
Yeah.
app equals GitLab shell, release equals GitLab CNY versus GitLab.
For
So if I could
Sidekick,
take a-
its QPod name is the specific one that we'd be looking towards.
Yes. Right. So you would
Yeah.
have, I think that we have it under the gitlab.com/sidekick QPod name or something along that line, or should have had. But you should be able to pull up the general chart from which it came, the release it's from, and whatever the delineator is for deployment sets, which, as John mentioned, for Sidekick.
Yeah, okay, so here we've got, see, what I notice is we don't have, like, I would quite like type on here specifically, our type label. So,
Well, you're looking at Calico for that first one. That's not.
yeah, that's just top K. Yeah, I mean, so if we just do, hey. So, it would be super helpful for me, at least, if we could have so there's what you were talking about. I mean, even that is kind of tricky because it doesn't quite match, we've got a specific label called stage, and it's main and main and CNY. And then we need to map that with, not very intelligent tools like Grafana and Graphonet into main stages, presumably label release GitLab, and then CNY is GitLab-CNY. So that, it's very difficult to kind of map if we don't use exactly the same labels. And so, yeah, I think, if we could get the type label on here, like a label underscore type, in the same way that we've got these ones, that would be super helpful as a starting point.
So we
You
have
can do
our
that, right?
Yeah, we've got our
Pardon
extra
me?
pod labels. I don't know if we could apply those to deployments as well.
We do have a global deployment annotations. I want to double check that we have labels.
Yeah, I'm sure that those are labeled. Like these, not that one, but like that one over there, that label app. I mean,
Yeah, app
that's a
is definitely
custom.
one.
Yeah. Just reload this.
It looks like we have an open issue to do a global deployment label, but we don't currently have one in place.
Like free-form labels on deployment would be super helpful, because that would probably be a better way to do it than using the name.
We should have a methodology to put that in place as it stands.
Okay.
I'll double check, and if we don't, I know we do have an open issue in regard to the globalized settings for certain labels. Okay.
Will you respond, or should I open an issue about that, Jason?
If you can go ahead and open an issue, I just slap it with the appropriate labels and get it moving.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
And Jason, what kind of severity can we apply to actually get this in quickly? I mean, I know we cannot clone you, but is there anyone else who could help us? Because you know that, like, in our land, everything needs to be happening like now, not in 13.7, 8, or 9, but now.
Right. So if this is indeed a production blocker, throw a production blocker on it, and that will automatically give it Sev 2 or Sev 1 based on whether it's needed like now or next week. But those are the labels that you're going to want to be able to get this set all the way to the top.
Okay. Andrew, I would argue that this is a blocker because we are in a weird state.
Yeah, like my take is that when we've had like issues with anything that's running in Kubernetes, people are like, it's Kubernetes. And then they don't have like a clear thing that's like, look, everything in Kubernetes is fine. This is a problem with the application. And I think, before we carry on rolling it out too much, we need to have like all of those things in place. So
well, yeah, let's slap that label then. We would want to do things faster if possible.
I added a couple comments here, Andrew. One is that I think this kind of belongs maybe in what you have as a service overview dashboard, which is the number of replicas and the number of nodes, because we've had incidents where like, okay, saturation is increasing, but it was due to a scale down event, which is something new in Kubernetes that we don't have with VMs. So being able to view that, I mean, I actually would like to see it alongside the saturation, but I'm not sure where it belongs. Again, like I don't want to crowd the dashboards too much.
Yeah, also we need to put some sort of HPA kind of something, whatever's driving the HPA, we need to have some graphs for that as well, right? Presumably at some stage.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't, the HPA is pretty dumb right now. It's just looking at average CPU utilization across all the pods, and it's hard coded to, well, it depends on the service, but yeah, we would have to, but I think for now, I mean, just seeing the number of replicas and number of nodes would be helpful. Number of nodes, I guess, would be at the service.
And you want that on the service overview dashboard?
I don't know, like the number of replicas, I almost kind of want to see that on like the service dashboard.
Yeah, that's fine.
But the number of nodes, I mean, that maybe is maybe on a different dashboard. I don't know. When you were talking about aggregating the metrics because it's so noisy, I think like having them broken down by zone is going to be extremely helpful. We're going to be moving the registry to the zonal clusters, and like we had in the last incident with registry, I mean, they really wanted to see whether only one particular availability zone was affected. And I think we should incorporate this into all the dashboards somehow. Maybe we just aggregate by zone and then have quantiles for each zone. I'm not sure.
So zone, so I've been using that first version that I did was cluster. So cluster kind of, is it the same? Or is
it is.
Because it is, yeah, there's a one-to-one mapping between the two, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So for each of those clusters, sorry, for each of those zones, we just want to show the median, the aggregate, the average. What's going to be useful in that view?
Probably maybe average, median, and max would be the best to see. Because like if you have a single pod that is fully saturated, you want to see that, and you also want to see the average.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that would be a good start. And so you're not thinking there'd be a selector for zone at the top, but rather just the panels will have
just three of them
aligned.
So what I was thinking is that like there's kind of some dashboards that are like a first port of call, and that's like, here's in the old way that we think of everything, here's the information presented. But if you want to go like really deep dive, we still like have the Kubernetes, the ones that ship with Kubernetes, those Grafana dashboards, and people can always go to that if they want like seriously deep dive, whatever those dashboards have on them. But like, so it's never going to kind of, because it's, the one thing about the way that I'm doing it is that obviously I have to build these recording rules for every metric that I use to get the type labels on, and it's fairly expensive. So we don't want to have like everything in there. We just want kind of like the ones that we will think as being useful. But yeah, like I think the other thing I wanted to know about was like, how does so on that metrics catalog, we've got the deployments and the containers, but we don't, obviously there's, well, not obviously, but as far as I understand it, there's a many-to-many relationship between node pools and services, right? And so do we want to have, I was going to say, do we want to have like a general like node pool health dashboard, and then kind of from the service overview, you can say like, show me like the node pool for this service. Sorry, it's not many to many. It's one service is in a node pool, but it's only ever in one node pool, right?
Yeah.
It's one to many. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, for now, we're trying to create a node pool per service. I don't know if that's
But
going to
that's not strictly true in every case at the moment, is it?
Yeah, it's not strictly true in every
Yeah.
case.
So that's fine as long as we can have, so it won't be like directly attached. It'll more be like, this is the node pool that this service is running in. And what about, we will always, all the components for a service like what we call Gits at the moment, which is GitLab shell and web service, will they be in the same node pool, or will they each have their own? Will each deployment have a node pool?
We created a separate node pool for GitLab shell, and the reason for that is that the workloads are just so different compared to GitLab, HTTPS. So in that case,
so
you
then
have one service in 2 node pools. I don't know.
So what it will be inside that kube deployments thing, there's like the deployments, and then each one will just have a node pool tag. That's fine.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Okay, I guess we've reached the end. It was a good meeting. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? If not, we end the call. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.